In certain instances, Ms. Verschuren had declared conflicts of interest but had abstained instead of recusing. In other instances, she had declared conflicts but voted outright. Another, she failed to declare a conflict and had voted. And then also the COVID relief payments where she relied on internal advice.
So she didn't breach it twice, as your report said. She breached it multiple times based on that. Can you tell me how many times she breached it?
In total, there were 24 instances.
24 times as chair she breached the Conflict of Interest Act.
Yes.
So, and your report deals with just the NR store and the Mars and the Basharian Vanity Center that she set up and their roles. That's in it. So when you looked at it, did you look at any other governor and council besides Mr. Ouimet? I do have some questions about Mr. Ouimet's in your report, but did you look at any of the other GICs? Because the Auditor General also named considerable number of other GICs who had conflict of interest.
We start an investigation and look when we have reason to believe there's grounds for an investigation or when we're being asked for. In this case, we were specifically asked for by Mr. Ouimet to look after Mrs. Verschuren and Mr. Ouimet, and we did so.
Do you not have the power to investigate anyone you want? You don't have to wait for a parliamentarian to ask. You can, when you are made aware of conflicts of interest in your mandate, can you not go at that? When you see that the Auditor General has named other governor and councils, why didn't you expand your report? 82% of the transactions that the Auditor General looked at, she found directors were in a conflict of interest. That's not a mistake of a legal advice. That's a culture of conflict of interest.
Yeah, but you forget, I can, as you quite rightly saying, self-initiate, but I have to initiate it if I have reasonable grounds to do so. The Auditor General report came after we issued the report on Mrs. Or just shortly before we issued. Was it before or after? No, who came first?
The Auditor General's report came first, yeah.
And we came about a month after.
So are you going to initiate, now that you're aware of way more instances of conflict of interest on your own?
What purpose would it serve? My job is
I'll tell you what, since you asked me the question.
Let me finish my answer. I can, if I make an what can I do? I can expose. That's all I can do. I can't fine, I can't fire.
With respect, Mr. Commissioner, that's your job, is to expose conflicts of interest. And the Auditor General found 82% of the time. You dismissed Mr. Ouimet and you said it was de minimis. It is inappropriate for somebody who's a public office holder to personally benefit. And in the case that you outlined, they personally benefit because that loan or that grant from the board that he was on that he voted for benefits that company. Not only did he do that, Mr. Ouimet, but he actually has numerous other conflicts of interest exposed by the Auditor General. So I ask again, since your report doesn't deal with the governor and council's overall and the culture of conflict of interest, will you take a look at all those other instances, including Mr. Ouimet?
And as I've answered you before, what purpose would it serve? All these persons...
Then what purpose do you have a job if you're saying that you don't have any responsibility whatsoever to look at conflicts of interest?
No,
Just
I do.
because, isn't that what you do? You expose them and let the public and parliamentarians decide what should happen since there is no sanctions. So why is it that you dismissed Mr. Ouimet when he had Lithium, Nouveau, and Swirltech, all his conflicts where he voted millions and millions of dollars to companies that he had investments in? Your report is inadequate, and you should initiate conflict of interest investigations where governor and council have been abusing their position 82% of the time.
Let's start at the beginning. My job is there to expose conflicts of interest. But if I find them and I expose them, then the person has to answer to the public, to the Prime Minister, or to the Speaker of the House, as the case may be. And my job is done basically in exposing it. I can't fine, I can't...
Yes, that's true, but you're not exposing them.
But they have to be in office. When they are no longer in office, what good does it serve to expose?
So your excuse is it's okay for a conflict of interest and you don't have to look at abuse of taxpayer dollars as long as they're no longer in office?
Abuse of taxpayer dollars is the Auditor General's job, not mine. Mine is conflict of interest, pure and simple. And there is no conflict if you're no longer in office. You do not have a conflict anymore.
So if I commit a conflict of interest while in office and I don't get caught, it's no longer a conflict of interest?
Of course, it was a conflict of interest. If I wanted to, I can. You are out of office. I start an investigation and say, while you were in office, you had a conflict of interest. End of story.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Are you investigating Mr. Boissonnault for violating the Conflict of Interest Act?
No.
You're not. Now going back to the study at hand, you said, Commissioner, that what is the point? What is the point of investigating someone like Ms. Verscheren, who is no longer in her position? Here you have a sitting minister who potentially violated the Conflict of Interest Act with not one, not two, but 9 smoking guns, and 2 months later, you haven't bothered to do anything further. Is that what you're telling this committee?
First of all, as you know, before I investigate, I have to have reasonable grounds to investigate. What you have here is a bunch of emails. Can I finish?
9 emails that name a Randy, one that just coincidentally happens to connect him to being in Vancouver, and you say you don't have any grounds? I'm just shocked at the lack of interest, the lack of curiosity of a sitting minister who may have contravened the Conflict of Interest Act.
Mr. Cooper, I'll ask you to let the witness. I'll ask you to let the witness respond. But at the same time, this is so far from what we're supposed to be studying, Mr. Cooper. Have you read?
What's the point?
Have you read the motion?
He said that with respect to Ms. Verscheren. Now I'm talking about a minister who's in his office, and he's not interested in investigating the minister. He's not interested in investigating Ms. Verscheren. He's not interested in investigating the minister. What is he interested in investigating?
Yes,
is he interested in actually enforcing the Conflict of Interest Act?
Mr. Cooper, I understand you're not a regular member of this committee. I'd appreciate if maybe the Vice Chair, Mr. Perkins, could brief you on how we do things around this committee. But we don't interrupt each other. We don't interrupt the Chair for one. And we talk when we have the floor. I haven't given you the floor. There's a point of order that's been raised, a very valid one, on relevance, and I think your questions are just not relevant.
I know Mr. Turnbull wants to run interference to protect Randy Boissonnault, and it appears you do too as well, Chair.
Mr. Cooper, well, that is just however, peu importe, Monsieur Cooper, comment vous voulez l'exprimer.
Regardless of how you put it, Mr. Cooper, I don't really care what subject you're wanting to pursue here. The committee is sovereign.